All right. I'm Peter Alessandria, and for the next 90 minutes, I invite you to be bigger than you think you are. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Let's take a look at our agenda for this evening. So as usual, we're going to start off with some announcements, then we'll do our recommended reading. It's a really good one tonight. Our affirmation of the day, then we'll do some introductions and victories. We'll listen to an excerpt from chapter 6 in my book, Be Bigger Than You Think You Are. We'll have our topic discussion, take a break at 8:15 or so, and then we'll come back, work on our assignment, and do some Q&A, and then wrap it up by 9 o'clock. Reminder that today's workshop is being recorded and will be available on the BeBiggerToday.com website and YouTube channel within the next 48 hours. Please feel free to stop your video and mute your microphone if you do not wish to be seen or heard on the recording. My paperback, author-signed paperback. This is the first edition. There are only a few copies left. Get your copy at BeBiggerToday.com/book and use the discount code workshop20 to save 20% at checkout. And I will personally sign this book for you. And while you're there, check out my New York City photo book, New York Cityscapes. This is the ultimate, definitive New York City photo book. It's a collaboration between myself and 6 other New York City area photographers. We each have our own unique take on the Big Apple, the landmarks and the skyline that make the city so great. And I love this book, and everybody who has seen it loves it too. So if you're a fan of New York City, check it out. Get a copy at on my website at BeBiggerToday.com/bookstore. It's on sale for $16.95, and I will sign that for you as well. The author-read audiobook for Be Bigger Than You Think You Are, this is actually the second edition. This is available for pre-order now at $9.99 and on my website at BeBiggerToday.com/bookstore. Comes with a full money-back guarantee. If you don't love it, you get your money back, but I know you're going to love it. And I am getting close, so within the next few weeks, this should finally be available. So the pre-order price is good until the book is actually available, the audiobook. So check it out, BeBiggerToday.com/bookstore. And while you're on the website, check out some merch, hats and t-shirts. Save 20% by using the discount code MERCH20 at checkout at BeBiggerToday.com/merch. You can also check out some of my original art and photography while you're there. These are my original landscape, cityscape, and abstract designs, professionally framed and signed by moi. And here's a little commercial for you guys. Peter's photos and abstract designs are uniquely beautiful, one-of-a-kind works of art. These gallery-wrapped canvas prints are set in a contemporary shadow box floating frame and will enhance the beauty of any home or office. Available in 4 different sizes, each piece is professionally framed and comes complete and ready to hang. Frames are available in your choice of black, white, or brown, and each is signed by the artist. Peter's original art and photography will make a great gift for a client, for yourself, or someone you love. Order yours today. So check out my original art at BeBiggerToday.com/art and photography. And while you are there, check out these refrigerator magnets. This is part of a collection of New York City souvenirs with my original New York City photos on them. These are high quality A+ refrigerator magnets, and you can get them at BeBiggerToday.com/merch. And if you have read the book in Chapter 7, there's a story behind my line of New York City souvenirs. It has to do with forgiveness, so check it out, Chapter 7 in the book. And we will be talking about that soon. I'm available for one-on-one coaching and or corporate consulting. So if you're a creative person, if you're a writer, a photographer, an artist, or if you have a business or work for a company and you would like me to come in and speak to your sales team, your management team, on how they can be bigger than they think they are, please reach out to me through the website and we'll set that up. My latest podcast still available, Fit for Joy podcast. This was a great conversation I had with Valeria. It is available on my website. Go to the homepage, look for this photo, click on it, and it will take you right to that conversation, that podcast. Finally, I'm accepting donations in order to continue to offer the workshop at no charge and keep it open to everyone. Suggested donation of $5 per week or $20 per month. You can send your donation directly to me at paypal.me/Peter Alessandria, all one word. And thank you so much for your support. All right, so let's kick it off tonight with our recommended reading. Now, this is another one of my favorite books. I've been very excited to share this with you guys. Some of you may be familiar with it. Some of you may not be familiar with it. So this book is called Dark Side of the Light Chasers, and it's written by Debbie Ford. It was actually published in 1999. And again, this is one of those books that I think I read right around the time that it first came out. And this is just a wonderful book. It fits in with what we've been talking about so far in Chapter 6. We have been discussing the ego, and many people, myself included, we associate the ego with the kind of dark side of our personality. And so in this book, Debbie Ford talks about how important it is to make peace with that part of ourselves that we've disowned. All those personality traits, all the things that we judge ourselves for, that we withhold love from ourselves for, that we criticize ourselves for, that we condemn ourselves for. This book is it's actually set up as a workbook, similar to my book, and it's a great tool to begin to reclaim that part of ourselves that many of us disowned probably at a pretty young age. And the basic theme of the book is we can't be whole until we integrate all of us and we make peace with the dark side. Make peace with the part of our personality that we judge as unlovable, not good enough, reprehensible, unattractive. That part of ourselves that we push away, that we, in some cases, pretend isn't there. In other cases, openly judge ourselves for, crucify ourselves for. Her premise in the book is that until we make peace with that, and until we reintegrate all of that into our total personality, we can never really realize our potential, because the dark side has gifts for us. If you're familiar with 12-step programs, people often talk about the character defects. And in my experience, number one, in most cases, those defects of character are really what I would call survival strategies. They're ways that we tried to cope with life when we didn't know any better, when we didn't have any other tools. But what's interesting is, in many cases, those character defects hide a gift. There's some strength, there's some gift, there's some gem that's hidden beneath the character defect. And so Debbie's book is a great way to get in touch with that and to reclaim that. Now, speaking of 12-step programs, this book was an integral part of my working Step 6. And Step 6 was, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And as part of this step, working this step, I read this book and I did the exercises. And it was very healing for me. It was very empowering. Because, as I said earlier, those defects of character are coping mechanisms. They're ways that we try to get through life, to survive. In some cases, they're survival strategies. And so we're not bad or wrong for having those characteristics, those personality traits. But what we want to do is learn a better way to cope with life, a better way to engage in life where we don't have to rely on those defects of character. So anyway, I highly recommend this book. She actually has another book called Secret of the Shadow, and I'll be talking about that in a future workshop. All right, so Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. Now, unfortunately, Debbie passed away several years ago, and it was actually very sad. I did a workshop with her back in the day. I think I sat like in the front row, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. She was associated with Deepak Chopra and his organization, and people like Alanis Morissette were there at the workshop. She made a splash in the world of personal growth, spiritual growth, and all of that. And she passed away from cancer several years ago. So I was very sad when I heard that. She was a lovely woman. And this book, her other book, The Secret of the Shadow, and I guess she has some other material that's available on her website. So go check it out at debbieford.com. All right, our affirmation of the day. I'm a good person, and it's okay for me to have a great life. Now, again, you guys know I love affirmations because the affirmation changes our state, changes our emotional state, changes our psychological state, in many cases from negative to positive. And as I always say, positive thoughts lead to positive feelings lead to positive words and actions, positive words and actions lead to positive outcomes in our lives. So it's very important to be conscious of our emotional state, our psychological state at any given time if we want to be more effective in life, if we want to create the life that we want to have. Now, I'm a good person. For most of my life, that was a stretch. I didn't think I was a good person. I thought I was bad, and not in a Michael Jackson kind of way. Rip MJ. I had this idea about myself that says I'm not good, I'm not lovable, I'm not okay, I'm not worthy. People are not going to like me. So here's the thing. It's my experience now, it's my understanding that it's not okay for me to have a great life if I don't think I'm a good person. Bad people don't deserve a good life. Bad people, unworthy people, unlovable people, they deserve to struggle. They deserve to suffer. They deserve to be disappointed by life, to be rejected, to feel ashamed and unworthy. So as long as that program is running my mind, my subconscious mind, and I'm not aware of it, then I'm going to create a life based on that belief about myself. My life is going to reflect that belief about myself. And trust me, I did this for years. I didn't have a great life. And it all stemmed from this idea that I didn't deserve to have a good life. I didn't deserve to have it easy. I had to struggle to get what I wanted in life. I had to put up with rejection. I had to put up with disappointment. So as I change how I see myself, I say on my website, change your thoughts about yourself and your life will follow. When I begin to shift that and I begin to embrace the notion that I'm a good person, that I am lovable, that I am worthy, that I'm worth being loved, I have something to offer, that shifts the entire tone of my life. As I always say, it's impossible to achieve anything or to act or have anything in our lives that's inconsistent with our predominant thoughts and beliefs about ourselves. So if my predominant thoughts and beliefs about myself are that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, people are not going to like me, I don't have anything to contribute, my life is going to reflect that. And what's worse, if I'm not aware of those thoughts, if they've been buried in my subconscious mind, if they're running my life and I'm not even conscious of that, then I'm going to go from situation to situation and deal with the disappointment, deal with the rejection, deal with all the negativity and wonder, why is this happening to me? Why is my life going like this? It must be my mother's fault, or it must be my father's fault, or it must be, it's always God's fault. God, why are you doing this to me? Without understanding that I'm doing all of this to myself based on the program that's running, black tie tonight. Sorry, I didn't tell you guys. Based on the program that's running in the subconscious mind. All right, so what we want to do is bring all that to the light and begin to shift that so we can have a different experience of life. So I invite you guys, if this resonates with you, walk around for the next week, and whenever you think of it, I'm a good person and it's okay for me to have a great life. I deserve to have a great life. You know, own that, embrace that, and see how your life changes. All right, so it's a portion of the workshop that we do our introductions and or victories. This is an opportunity for somebody who's new to introduce yourself, or if you would like to share a victory or celebration from the past week, now's your chance. Unmute and say hi.
Peter, I just want to claim my seat, and I can't get over that spectacular photograph behind you. You must tell us about your the new photograph. It's incredible. Really nice. Glad to be here.
Glad you're here, Dee Dee. Yeah, so this is, that's the full moon, obviously. So as you guys know, part of my photography gig is I chase the full moon around the New York City area. And this was a shot taken by Newark Airport, since I'm actually in Jersey. And it just lined up that night with the flight path. So I was able to catch it. I actually had that shot in mind, using a long telephoto lens to capture the moon. And this is available on the Big Wall Decor website. You can purchase prints this size. I think they have them even bigger than this if you want. But yeah, so I love the full moon, and so there you go. Thank you for noticing. Anybody else want to say hi or share a victory? Cynthia.
Thank you, Peter. What a wonderful group it is already tonight. Thank you, everyone. I love the photo too. I'm just like, oh yes. So my victory today is that I have had just an incredibly, well, it's not incredible. I have had a productive, creative, filled to capacity day, and I still have a few more things to round it out later after this. But I'm so pleased with myself and just going from one thing to the next thing to the next. And it's been peaceful. It's been just the kind of day that I would like to have often. So lots of different threads interwoven through the day. So thank you, because I do deserve to have this kind of life. Thank you.
All right. Well, as always, I only have one thing to say. Woohoo! It's great.
Thank you.
I love to hear that. And yeah, it's okay for me to have a great life. And that means without all the struggle and the problems and the conflicts and the drama and everything else. And sometimes it's hard to accept that because, I get so used to the conflict and the drama and feeling unfairly treated by life. And then the righteous anger. We talked about this last week when we talked about some of the characteristics of the ego. The ego loves justified anger, loves to feel unfairly treated. And A Course in Miracles says, beware the temptation to perceive yourself unfairly treated. It's a temptation. Anyway, great. Thank you, Cynthia. Anybody else want to say hi or share a victory? All right. So let's carry on then. So continuing on with chapter 6, would you rather be right or happy? We're going to be on this chapter for a few more weeks at least. And then after that, obviously, is chapter 7, where we talk about forgiveness. But this is really, as you'll see, this is laying the foundation, the groundwork for what we're up against when it comes to practicing forgiveness. It's very difficult when I'm being run by my ego. And again, if you missed last week's workshop, I urge you to go watch the video for last week's workshop because we really kind of laid the foundation for what that means. When I'm being run by my egoic mind, it's very difficult to even think about forgiveness. It's very difficult to consider peace, and because the ego loves conflict, it loves drama, and it loves justified anger, and is not interested in letting anybody off the hook, and is not interested in seeing anybody as the same as we are. It's all about separation. It's all about you're bad, I'm good, you're wrong, I'm right, and being justified in attacking other people, and all the stuff that we do when we're run by the ego. So this chapter is, and the whole idea, what I'm talking about here, is to bring some awareness, because most of the time, most of us, in one way or another, are run more by our egoic mind than what A Course in Miracles would call our right-minded self. And the right-minded self sees oneness, not separation. The right-minded self is more interested in peace and connection and love, versus the ego, which is addicted to fear. Addicted to conflict, addicted to drama. And most of us think that that's just how life is. We don't even realize that we have a choice. At least I didn't realize I had a choice. But it's difficult to make that choice when I'm not aware that that's what's running my life. All right. So we're going to start off tonight with the audiobook from chapter 6, another excerpt. It's about 10 minutes. And when we come back, we'll get into our discussion.
Archery, the sport of kings. Footnote 51. I actually think fox hunting is a sport of kings, but I like the phrase, and I also imagine the foxes would have a better chance if the hunters used bows and arrows. Back to the text. We said earlier the ego feels slighted and attacked by others for any or no reason at all. It's the self-centered, self-absorbed, insecure part of our minds that's consumed with what it thinks other people think of us. It takes great pains to impress others and has a huge investment in being seen as special and thus better than other people. Yet knowing what we now know, it should be easy to see that every time the ego takes offense, the real source of the upset lies in its own self-doubt and insecurity. As we said in Chapter 4, the only reason we're upset when someone makes a negative comment about us is we're afraid what they're saying is actually true. Thus, it's our own negative thoughts and beliefs about ourselves that cause us to feel hurt or slighted. If we're secure in who we think we are, then it doesn't matter what someone else thinks of us. Let's see how this plays out by doing a little exercise. Pick an activity you have no ability or interest in. I'll use archery because, other than as a 9-year-old at sleepaway camp in upstate New York many, many years ago, I have no experience or proclivity for it. I don't mean to offend anyone who loves archery, by the way, although if you are offended, you'll understand why in a minute. The way this works is find someone you don't know and ask them to tell you that you stink at whatever activity you picked. The preference is to do this with a stranger so you'll be less likely to try to impress them. Although if you're like me and go out of your way to impress complete strangers, well, then you have issues. For me, I would ask this person to tell me that they think I'm terrible at archery. For example, they might say, "You're the worst archer I know. You stink. You'll never be any good at it, so you may as well pack up your quills and go home. You're a complete loser when it comes to archery." And so on. Have someone do the same for you. I'll wait. Now notice how you feel. In my case, other than perhaps being a little triggered by the word loser, I really wouldn't care about what they were saying. It might even be a little comical depending on how over the top they were. This is because I don't have an investment in seeing myself as good at archery. Excelling at this activity is not part of my egoic self-image. Now moving on to part 2 of this little experiment, think of something you do have an interest or investment in. For me, that might be photography. Ask that same person to tell you, in the same way, that you stink at that thing. Now how do you feel? Even though it's the same general situation, someone criticizing your abilities, you might have a very different reaction. If what they're saying hurts, it's because you have an investment in being seen in a certain way. For me, I could care less if you criticize my archery skills, but God forbid you accuse me of being a bad photographer. Now the key point is what I mentioned earlier. The real reason we're reacting negatively when someone else criticizes us is not because of what that person is saying or doing. It's because we're afraid what they're saying about us might be true. How we see ourselves, who we think we are, with regard to that thing is secretly negative. In my case, if I'm subconsciously afraid that I'm not a good photographer, I'd be more apt to be upset by your criticism of me in this arena. Yet I don't feel bad because of what you've said or done. I feel bad because of my own internal self-image. Yet until I begin to grasp that my upsettedness is about me and not you, the fragility of my ego may even lead to me feeling justified in attacking you back. Taking responsibility for our actions and reactions means we would never be upset by what anyone else says or does. We stop giving our power away and take full responsibility for how we feel. Eventually, by seeing ourselves differently and forgiving ourselves for our perceived flaws and shortcomings, we're no longer triggered by what other people say or do. This is how the ego is ultimately undone. Self-confidence. Way back in Chapter 1, I mentioned that we would be revisiting the topic of confidence later in this book. I said it was likely that successful people are good at what they do because they have a positive self-image. They probably, consciously or unconsciously, see themselves in a way which says, I got this, I can handle this, irrespective of what may have happened in the past. Believing they can handle whatever life sends their way is a type of confidence. But I also said there's another type of confidence which is really important for us to have if we want to be truly happy and have a successful life. When I first started working on myself many years ago, I came to the conclusion that a big part of my problem was that I lacked self-confidence. It was pretty clear to me that the anxiety I felt in most work and social situations was caused by the fact that I didn't see myself in a very positive way. Yet I really had no idea what it meant to be confident. So one day I went to the dictionary and looked up the definition of the word confidence. The first one was a feeling of self-assurance arising from an appreciation of one's own abilities or qualities. I could certainly see how more self-assurance and an appreciation of my own abilities would be helpful, but it was another definition that caught my eye. It defined a confidence as a trusting relationship. I interpreted this to mean being able to trust someone to look out for your best interests and or not attack or harm you. When I extrapolated this definition to self-confidence, I decided that self-confidence is a trusting relationship with myself. I mentioned previously that in the past I could be very harsh and critical towards myself, especially when I messed something up. So a trusting relationship meant I could trust myself to be nice to myself rather than attack myself for my mistakes. It also meant I could depend on myself not to abandon myself in the face of a negative comment or criticism from somebody else. In general, I could count on myself to be more loving, kind, and gentle towards myself. I said earlier it's my belief that the root of much of our emotional pain is self-hatred. Of course, it's not pleasant when someone else directs negative energy our way. Yet if I can't trust myself to not abandon myself in the face of someone else's criticism, then I'm kind of screwed. Not standing up for myself or being harsh with myself for messing something up are expressions of self-hatred. Thus, for me, self-confidence is being able to trust myself to love myself when I need it the most, and to forgive myself for the times that I don't. This idea of a trusting relationship with myself has had profound implications for me. Throughout most of my life, I feared rejection and criticism. That was one of the reasons it took me so long to put myself out there as a photographer and artist. Yet if the fear was really the result of my own lack of self-love, that meant I wasn't the potential victim of other people's unkindness, but only of my own. Once I saw this and began to change how I treated myself, I was better able to take steps to move forward in my career. I think my own lack of self-love had its roots in how I was treated as a child. While I wasn't perfect in terms of my own behavior, there were many instances where I needed to be consoled or comforted or just allowed to be a kid and have my feelings. Unfortunately, that was not always given me. Instead, I was often met with consternation, impatience, and punishment. Not by a bad parent, not by an unloving parent, but by someone who didn't know how else to react to me. Someone who had their hands full taking care of the family and who was just trying to do the best they could to keep it all together. As I said earlier, the problem is, as kids, we don't have the necessary mental faculties and awareness to let what other people do be about them. In my case, I internalized everything. I also didn't have any real means of taking care of myself in the face of unloving behavior by the adults in my life. So I usually just had to sit there and take it. I absorbed the negativity, and it became the fabric of who I thought I was. The result was, for most of my life, I was very angry about what had happened. Looking back, I can see how I took out that anger on myself and other people. But then it was pointed out to me, by the person I blamed for all my issues, by the way, that my anger was hurting me more than anyone else. I eventually realized that hating someone else wasn't being loving towards me. So I started looking at all this a little closer. As I reviewed my childhood, I could see there was another way to look at it. I realized I could tell a different story about what had happened. This would mean giving up some of my ideas about being victimized and unfairly treated. I didn't deny the pain I had experienced, and I didn't make excuses for someone else's inappropriate behavior. But I did find a new way to explain what had happened. Do I wish things had been different? Honestly, some days, yes. But now as an adult, I'm able to see it from the other side and appreciate how difficult it can be to raise children. My parents definitely did the best they could with what they had. And of course, it wasn't all bad. They certainly did a lot of really good and wonderful things for me and my siblings. I can also see how my experiences made me who I am today. For example, I probably wouldn't be writing this book if I didn't have the childhood I had. It's also true the negative stuff stopped a long time ago. These days, I receive much love and support from the same person who challenged me so much as a kid. The sum total is I'm more willing to forgive what happened and appreciate all the positive things my childhood had to offer. It's also clear that it was my own pattern of unkindness towards myself which formed the basis of much of my anguish as an adult. I was always so unforgiving and hard on myself. Yet I see now this was my way of keeping the hurt going by doing to myself what had originally been done to me by others, and then blaming them for it. Again, it's not to say we have to make excuses for any of the unloving things that may have happened to us as kids. But as we'll see in the next chapter, it's only by forgiving our past that we can move forward into our future. All right, so that's our audiobook for tonight from chapter 6. A lot of stuff in there. Definitely still challenging for me at times to deal with some of the issues, especially that I talked about towards the end. And I'll talk more about that probably more next week and the week after, but I'm actually going to mention some of it later tonight as well. So let's take a look at the first slide for tonight. And I want to focus on this first to begin, to start us off, this idea, talk about insecurity. And I know many people suffer from insecurity. I certainly have suffered most of my life from insecurity in one form or another. So here are some dictionary definitions. Beset by fear and anxiety, lack of confidence or assurance, self-doubt, not sure, uncertain. Now, again, as I talked about in the audiobook tonight, what's so interesting for me to realize was that the source of my insecurity was nothing that was outside of me. You know, it wasn't what other people were doing or not doing to me. It wasn't, you know, it seemed like that at the time, and it was very, what's the word? It was very easy to blame other people for when I felt insecure, when I was anxious, or when I felt rejected or not worthy or not good enough. So it was very easy for me to pin that on somebody else, and I could very clearly say, well, because you did this, I feel this way. But we know now from, you know, reading the book and doing the workshops for the last 9 months, nobody makes us feel anything. Nobody has power to make me feel anything. And so when I began to look at this more closely and kind of really dig into this process of how our thoughts manifest as feelings and how our feelings kind of run the show for many of us, and I began to question whether or not it was really somebody else's fault that I felt insecure, that I felt anxious, that I felt not good enough, or whatever the specific feeling was. And so what I realized was that it wasn't the fact that somebody was rejecting me or being unkind to me or criticizing me that was the problem,
The problem was I thought they were right. The problem was I thought that they were correct in me being not good enough. That they were right about me being unworthy, and all of that. And when I realized that, it was like a light bulb moment for me to understand that, the source of my distress has nothing to do with them. It's only because I think they're right that I feel the way I feel. Remember, we talked about this numerous times. What happens is information from the outside world comes in through our senses, our eyes, our hearing, the information comes in, but it has to pass through this internal filter that we all have. And this filter is based on who we think we are. It's based on how we see ourselves. And it's often based on our past experiences. So we build this image of ourselves based on what happened to us in the past, without understanding that what happened to us in the past was based on this negative self-image that many of us carry. So the information passes through that filter, and then we assign a meaning to the event. And it's to that meaning that we react. We're not actually reacting to what's going on around us. And the way we know this is true is because two people could be sitting in the exact same situation, under the exact same circumstances, and have a different reaction, have a whole different experience. Same situation, and yet they have a completely different experience. What's different? Only the meaning they give the situation based on how they see themselves. Now, it turns out this is really good news, because what most of us don't know is that it's often much easier to change how we see ourselves than it is to change the external circumstances and events of our lives and conditions. But we don't know that. So we often try to change what's going on outside of us in the hopes that then we can feel okay. Then we'll feel safe, then we'll feel loved, then we'll feel secure. But again, as I say in the book, and I think I've probably said a dozen times in the workshops, it's very difficult to change external events, conditions, circumstances, especially other people. If I think you're my problem, and I invest all my time and energy in trying to change you so I can feel better, that never worked for me. Maybe you guys have more luck with that, but that never worked for me. That was just heartache, disappointment, conflict, drama, angst, whatever you want to call it. So as I begin to take responsibility for how I feel in every situation, and I understand that how I feel is directly related to how I see myself in that situation, now all of a sudden I'm much easier to be in relationship with. Because I'm not blaming you for how I feel. I'm not blaming you. When I feel insecure, it's like, oh, I get it. It's not your fault that I feel insecure. And it's not really my fault, but it is I am the cause of that. I want to be careful of that word fault. But I am the cause of that. You're not the cause of how I feel. I'm the cause of how I feel. So even if you're being inappropriate, now again, I say this a million times, if somebody really is being harmful, inappropriate, unloving, we always have to take care of ourselves. And we're going to talk about, in Chapter 7, we're going to talk all about boundaries. Because boundaries, healthy boundaries, are the primary way that we take care of ourselves in our relationships with other people. But until I know how to do that, it's very difficult for me to take responsibility for my part in that situation and everything that goes along with that. So we want to be conscious, we want to be aware that when we're feeling, I'll speak for myself, that when I'm feeling insecure, when I'm feeling that anxiety, when I'm feeling a lack of confidence, a lack of self-assurance, self-doubt, that's always about me. It's never about the other person. Now again, if they're acting inappropriately, then it's okay for me to do whatever I need to do to take care of myself in that situation. It's always my job to take care of myself in all situations and with all people. But they're still not responsible for how I feel. If I'm feeling insecure, if I'm feeling anxious and all of that, that's about me, it's not about them. And until I really got that, and I still struggle with this, by the way, but that's the beginning of us taking our power back. Because as long as I'm blaming you for how I feel, if I'm saying, no, it's your fault that I feel insecure, you're being mean to me, you're criticizing me, you're rejecting me, look, oh, poor me. As long as that's my point of view and where I'm coming from, I'm giving my power away. Because I'm saying, I can't decide how I feel. You're deciding how I feel for me. You're making me feel the way I feel. Totally disempowered way to live. All right, not making excuses for inappropriate behavior, and how I feel is always about me, it's never about somebody else. So when I have this insecurity in my relationships, the only reason I feel that way is because I think that, and if they're saying something negative, or if they're criticizing me or rejecting me, the only reason that I have that negative feeling is because I think they're right. I think what they're saying is true. I think I'm not good enough. So, and this is when we're operating from the ego. All right, this is why we spent so much time last week, and we'll continue to talk about what it means to be in our egoic mind. What it means to be when we're operating from the ego's running the show. So every time we take offense, the real source of our upset lies in our own self-doubt and insecurity. So if I'm offended by what you're saying or doing, it's not what you're saying or doing that's making me feel that way. It's my own self-doubt and insecurity that's giving rise to those feelings. The only reason we're upset when someone makes a negative comment about us is we're secretly afraid that what they're saying is true. Thus, it's our own negative thoughts and beliefs about ourselves that cause us to feel hurt or slighted. Remember, the ego is always offended by things. It's always like we take offense. How could you do that to me? How could you say that about me? How could you, that's the ego. So if we're insecure, because here's the thing, if I'm secure in who I think I am, then it doesn't matter what somebody else thinks about me. I talk about this with regard to my photography all the time. I really don't, these days, I want people to like my work. I want people to like my work enough that they're going to purchase it and put it in their home and tell their friends about it. And I want that for everybody, but the reality is not everybody's going to feel that way about my photography. And so I have really detached from people liking or not liking my work. Because I know there are some people going to love it, some people who are not going to love it. Most people are going to be somewhere in the middle and not really care either way. And that's just the reality of it. So I no longer have to live in fear of people not liking my work. And the truth is, I think it's pretty good. I like my work. I like me and I like my work. And I never liked me before, and I never liked my work enough that I could feel good about myself independent of what I think you think of me or what I think you think of my work. That's power. That's freedom. There was some philosopher, I forget maybe it was Descartes, somebody, who said freedom is being free of the good opinion of other people. Wanting other people to like me and then feeling bad if I think they don't, that's first of all, that's powerlessness. That's total recipe for, and it's a total recipe for an unhappy life, because I suddenly have no control over over my happiness, because my happiness is dependent on what I think you think about me, or what I think you think about my photography or my book or whatever. So as long as I'm secure in who I think I am, it doesn't matter what somebody else thinks about me. And that's true power. I'm deciding for myself. So again, this was in the audiobook tonight. I talked about self-confidence. And a lot of us think of self-confidence as that self-assurance, a feeling of self-assurance arising from an appreciation of one's own qualities or abilities or qualities. That's great. And hopefully we all have that. But what I realized was, and again, I talked about this in the audiobook tonight, when I first got into recovery for codependency, it occurred to me that one of my big problems was I lacked confidence. I lacked that self-assurance. But I wasn't really sure what confidence was. I mean, this is how far removed I was from it. I mean, I didn't even really know what confidence was. So I went to the dictionary and I looked up the definition of the word confidence. And the first one was the definition you just saw. But then I also saw another definition. It was a little further down. And it was a noun, I think. And it was a confidence. And a confidence was a trusting relationship. Now, I've talked about this on the workshop before, but what I did was I took that to say, well, so self-confidence must be a trusting relationship with myself. Now, what does that mean? And I realized that so much of my misery, so much of my unhappiness, so much of my anxiety was born out of the fact that I couldn't trust myself just to be nice to myself, especially if I messed something up, if I made a mistake, if I failed at something. I was so hard on myself. And it was being hard on myself that was creating all the fear, the anxiety. Again, I talked a lot about this. It was the fear of self-recrimination that made it so hard for me to get my photography business going. Because I was so critical of my work, I was so critical of myself, whether I was making cold calls or submitting my photos for shows and exhibitions or whatever. I was constantly beating myself up. I was constantly berating myself. And that self-recrimination is what caused the fear. So when I picked up the phone to make a cold call and I felt anxious, it wasn't because of what the other person was doing on the other end of the phone. As I say in the book and as I said on the workshop, most of the people I called were very nice to me. In 2 years of cold calling, I never got hung up on once. And a lot of them, I guess they felt sorry for me. They gave me the names of other businesses or friends that I could call, because they themselves weren't interested. They were all very nice. Yet I was filled with fear. I was sweating and I was stammering and I was shaking and I was, my voice was cracking, and it was a miserable experience. And what I realized was, before, during, and after every call, I was beating myself up. I was so hard on myself. You sound like an idiot. You don't know what you're doing. They're not going to like you. You can't really, you're not a good photographer. You suck. It was all the negative self-talk that was running my life. And so that's what was creating the fear. And then the fear was the resistance. So it was very hard for me to get stuff done. It was very hard for me to take healthy risks, to put myself out there. All right? So self-confidence is a trusting relationship with myself. I trust myself to be nice to myself, especially when I mess something up. I trust myself to be kind to myself, when I'm not perfect, when I make a mistake, when I disappoint somebody, when I do something wrong. That's the trusting relationship that, for me, removes the fear. Because now the self-recrimination, once the self-recrimination is gone, well, now, I don't have to worry about anybody else's opinion of me because I actually like myself now. I feel good about myself. I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes, but I can still love myself when I least like who I'm being. So now all of a sudden I could do all the things I couldn't do before to move my life forward, to move my business forward and all of that. Not perfect. Still have my moments. As recently as this morning, I had some negative self-talk because I did something imperfectly. But I don't stay mired in that for days, weeks, and months anymore. It could be a couple of hours at the most. And now it's like, it's like, why bother? Why beat myself up? Because I'm just going to forgive myself anyway, and it doesn't really matter because I didn't, I'm the only one who is beating myself up. So, all right, so let's look at the next slide, and then we're going to take our break. So here's what I got. So being hard on myself was my way of keeping the hurt going by doing to myself what had been originally done to me what had originally been done to me by others. Now, I received a lot of criticism as a kid. A lot of criticism, and I internalized all of that. And I thought it meant that I was not, I see now the criticism was the intention was, in some cases, not always, but in some cases, the criticism was, so I would be better, so I would do things better. So I was told what I was doing wrong and criticized for something, and the idea was, well, until he knows that he's doing it wrong, how can he do it better? Now, I choose to do things differently with the children in my life, and I choose to do things differently with myself, but in that person's mind, that was the way that I was going to improve. But I learned to be very hard on myself. And what that did was it perpetuated the hurt. It kept the hurt going. And then what I did was I blamed that person for me hurting myself. See, they stopped criticizing me, but I kept criticizing myself, and it was their fault. That was the insanity, and that's what the ego does. This is why I keep emphasizing the ego. The ego blames everybody else for what we do, how we feel, who we are. And I've been saying from day one, no, the way we get our power back is by taking responsibility. So when I realized this, and it was actually pointed out to me by the person who I was angry at, that I was only hurting myself by doing what I was doing, I was like, oh, wow, they were right. I was perpetuating this, blaming them for my actions. I was the one who was beating myself. They stopped. They weren't beating me up anymore. I was beating myself up, but I was blaming them for that. And, and in my mind, it made perfect sense because it was like, well, I am the way I am because of what you did to me. It's your fault. If only you were a better parent, I wouldn't feel the way I feel, and I wouldn't do the things that I do to myself. But that's the ego. The ego doesn't take responsibility. I'm an adult. I actually had moved across the country at that point, and I was still blaming somebody else for what I was doing to myself. And it was my way to feel justified and to say, and to make them wrong. That's the ego. The ego wants to make somebody else wrong. Remember, the title of this chapter is, Would You Rather Be Right or Happy? And being right in terms of the ego, as opposed to being correct, I say being right means we have to make somebody else wrong. That's the ego. And that does not serve us. And that's not an empowered way to live. And you know what? I could have spent my life doing that. And I know people who spend their lives doing that. Blaming somebody else for what they do to themselves, not taking responsibility, and living a miserable life. And in an odd way, I thought I was getting back at them. I thought I was hurting them by hurting myself. And again, I see this I see a lot of people that operate this way. We hurt ourselves to try and hurt somebody else. All right, so that's it for the slides tonight. So being hard on myself was my way of keeping the hurt going by doing to myself what had been originally done to me by others. Now, again, as I said in the audiobook tonight, I'm not making excuses. There was, in my estimation, there was some inappropriate behavior. There was definitely unloving behavior in my childhood. So I'm not making excuses for that. I'm also not denying the pain I felt, because there was a lot of pain. I mean, for me to be this screwed up at this point in my life, I must have really been in a lot of pain. It must have been really hard. So I'm not denying the pain. I'm not denying my feelings. And I get to tell a different story about all of that now, because I want to be free of it. That's a big part of forgiveness, is when we begin to tell a different story. And I begin to see that person differently. I see myself differently first, and then I can see other people differently. So when I began to say, well, they did the best they could. This is the way they were raised. In fact, they had it worse than I did. When I began to see that and understand that we can't give what we don't have to give. And then on top of that, I don't have any kids of my own, but I see with my siblings and their kids, I see how difficult it is to be a parent. I say over and over in the book, parenting is hands down the toughest job on the planet. You know, anything that I've ever done in my life is easy compared to what you guys who are parents have to do. So I said, well, and you know, and my parents were young when they had me. They were in their 20s, you know. And I think about when I was in my 20s, could I actually raise a child in a functional way? So all of a sudden I had compassion instead of contempt for somebody else's shortcomings. And, you know, that whole experience made me who I am today. I mean, I probably would not be sitting here, you know, probably would not have written this book and been sitting here talking to you guys if I had a different childhood. So in some ways, you know, this has shaped me, has shaped my life. And for most of my life, I just wanted to be angry about it. And I just wanted to blame them, and I just wanted to be angry, and I just wanted to be miserable and say it was all their fault. And then eventually, you know, I realized, wow, you know, I don't want to do that anymore. Because, as I said in the audiobook, hating someone else is not being loving towards me. All right, I got to change the battery on this camera, so let's roll into our break for tonight. Oh, exercise. We're going to do this when we come back. I wanted you guys to identify at least one skill, trait, or activity that you have no interest or proclivity for. Then identify a second one where you have an investment in being seen in a certain way by other people, because we're going to do the archery example, the archery exercise from chapter 6. It's on page 189. If you didn't hear the audiobook tonight, we're going to do the archery exercise. All right, let's roll into our break. We'll be back in 5 minutos. All right, so what I want to do is talk about the exercise for tonight. So again, if you weren't here for the audiobook, on page 189 in the first edition, I do this process I call the archery process. And basically what I do is have people pick two activities. One activity or trait or characteristic that they have actually no interest in, no proclivity for, that kind of thing. And in my case, that's archery. And it's funny because I've had people who've read the book who love archery. I'm not besmirching archery or anything like that. It's not something that the last time I did it, I was 9 years old at sleepaway camp in upstate New York. And have somebody, and then what we do is, and then we pick another activity I'll describe in a moment, but have somebody criticize you for that. Tell you you're no good at it, and again, in the book I talk about, it's hypothetical, but it's, somebody saying to me, Peter, you're the worst archer I know. You stink. Pack up your quills and go home. You'll never make it as an archer. You're a complete loser when it comes to archery. And because I have no interest or I have no ego identification with being good at archery, it doesn't matter. I'm not upset by it. I don't feel angry at them for saying mean things to me, and all of that. And then I say, now pick a second activity or trait or whatever that you do have an investment in being seen a certain way and being seen positively by other people. And of course, for me, it would be photography. And now have that same person criticize you for that. Peter, you're a terrible photographer. You may as well pack it in. You do this wrong, you do that wrong, and you're unoriginal, and you have too much color and contrast and saturation. I've actually heard all of that. And if I feel upset, if I feel insecure, if I feel angry, if I feel like I want to attack them back because it's hurting my ego, it's only because I think they're right that I'm upset. It's only because I secretly believe that I'm no good at photography or whatever it is that I feel upset. Because now I notice that I believe I'm talented. I believe I'm a great photographer. So if somebody doesn't like my work or says something negative about it, my ego is not offended by that. I'm not upset by that. So I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to try this out for yourself. So I'm hoping that there's at least one or two people who were willing to put their ego on the line tonight and give us an example of something that you're not interested in, that's, like archery for you is for me, and then something that you really do have an investment in, and we'll kind of back and forth a little bit with that, dialogue with that. Anybody want to try that?
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Barb.
I wasn't here for the first part, but I'm trying to get what you're saying, and I'm actually having, I read it and I'm going, I don't know what he's talking about, but now you explained it a little bit different. So, okay, I don't know if you really want to do it back and forth, but what you're saying, if somebody said, say, drawing.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, drawing. Okay, so you're going to tell me I'm horrible, I stink at drawing.
So you're artistic, you're talking about artistic drawing.
Yeah, I have no interest in it, or I have no talent in it.
Okay, great. And now what do you have interest in?
I know. And so I was trying to think what that is, and I don't. But I will say that I told you this before, like say when I was a flight attendant or other things that I did, when I left, somebody told me that I had a terrible reputation at it, and I thought I was the greatest thing in the whole world. I thought I did a very good job. I tried the best I could and everything, and somebody told me that I was terrible at it. And I don't know. Is that kind of the same thing? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, were you upset by it when they told you that?
Yeah, well, that's what I guess I'm trying to get with you. Was I upset? guess so. I mean, it was like a gut punch, I guess, more than upset. I mean, it's like, boom, you don't expect it.
Well, was it pleasant?
No, very unpleasant. But I
Right.
wasn't, okay. But in my case, I wasn't going, it's when I was leaving, I wasn't going to continue doing it. And then to tell another story. And at the same time, I had somebody say to me, when I was leaving, they said, oh, that's such a shame. I went to go work for DHL and they said, oh, that's their gain and our loss. So I was like, well, that's nice. So I got, twofold. I don't know.
All right. Well, I'm not saying that we shouldn't receive compliments. I'm not saying that we shouldn't receive feedback that can make us better at our job. But I am saying that if I have I'll speak for myself. I don't want to put you on the spot, Barb. But if I have a negative reaction to somebody criticizing me, it's only because I have an ego investment in being seen as good at that thing, in being seen positively by others. But what that ego investment is covering up, and maybe you guys don't have this, maybe I'm the only one who suffers from this, but what that ego investment is covering up is the secret belief that I'm not good enough. It's the secret belief that they're right about me not being good enough, about me being a bad flight attendant. See, if I don't really, again, we should be open. I think it's helpful to be open to feedback. Certainly want to be able to receive compliments. But I also think that when I'm offended, now remember the ego, we're talking about being offended and wanting to, if I'm offended by what you say and I want to attack you back, that's the ego.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
If I feel offended and then I feel justified in either attacking you directly or indirectly, passive aggressive, maybe I'll go gossip about you, maybe I'll badmouth you to somebody else. All of that is ego identification. And I don't think that serves us. And the only reason I react that way, again, maybe it's different for you guys, is because I'm afraid what you're saying about me is true. If I wasn't afraid that what you were saying was true, I couldn't give a shit what you think about me. Again, I'm open to feedback. I'm open to feedback, that can make me better. But if somebody's criticizing me and I take offense to that, how could you say that about me? And I want to get even. That's ego 101 right there. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, yeah, I understand that. Sometimes you don't want to have that confrontation, that fight back. So I guess I would have to say in those situations when somebody told me that I was not good at what I was doing, yeah, it just made me feel, I don't know if that's the ego. I accepted that and I lived with that. And that's a bad thing. That's a terrible thing. Those are the things you take in as you go through life. And that's when, you're feeling not so good about yourself. And the bottom line is I shouldn't have cared what that person was saying about me. If I was doing the best job I could, that person's wrong. You know what I mean? You actually could probably say that person has a problem. That person is wrong. I didn't do, I probably was very good.
Well, and it's my experience because I've been the other person. I've been the one who's been critical.
Yeah,
you're right.
I don't know why they're being critical of me. It's their problem.
Well, I always say, I tell my 14-year-old niece, I say, whenever anybody says anything mean to you, they're really talking about themselves.
Right.
See, I would never have to be mean to you if I didn't hate myself. It's projection. We talked about this last week. Projection. It's when we project out the stuff, and this is why the recommended reading tonight was Debbie Ford, Dark Side of the Light Chasers. That's why her book is so good. It's because we project out onto other people all the stuff we don't like about ourselves and then blame them for it.
Mm.
So if I'm criticizing you, it's really because I don't like myself. Or that same trait or characteristic that I haven't owned.
I haven't accepted about myself.
Right. And I would have to say way back then, but I would say that, yes, when somebody did that to me, I'm not saying I hadn't worked on myself enough to really feel good about myself. But I do think when they did say it to me, I thought about it and I was like, no, I think you have but I didn't say it to them. No, I think you have the problem more than I did. So maybe that was a good thing.
Well, yeah, so that's great. So that's good. That's not, you don't have to take on somebody else's negativity.
No, and now throughout the years, especially lately, doing this workshop, I'm feeling so much better about myself. I would have been able to just, what would be the word, whistle and skip away when somebody said something like that to me, right? It would be like,
well, yeah, we could do that, or we could even, depending on the nature of the relationship, we can even have compassion for them and say, wow, they're trying to hurt me. They must feel really bad about themselves to want to hurt me. Is there some way I could be of service to them?
Yeah.
Now, it's a fine line. You don't want to put yourself in harm's way if somebody's really being inappropriate. But it just shifts the whole equation. See, I'm not offended anymore. I can have compassion. Say, wow, they must really be having a bad day to have to attack me for my photography. Mm-hmm. Try posting photos like this on Facebook. Everybody's got an opinion.
Right.
And it's like, wow, they must feel really bad about themselves if they feel we're going to talk about this in chapter 7. One of my favorite quotes from the Conversation with God book series by Neil Donald Walsh.
Yes.
He says, when somebody's trying to hurt you, you can actually say to them, if it's appropriate, again, you don't want to put yourself in harm's way if somebody's really being inappropriate. But the question is, what hurts you so much that you feel you have to hurt me to heal it? Mm-hmm. I argue in chapter 7, that when we hurt other people, we're not in our right mind. It's not in our nature to want to hurt somebody else unless we're hurting. Anybody who's been in 12-step programs, they say hurt people hurt people. Mm. So I can begin to have compassion for those people that are attacking me on Facebook. And again, in chapter 7, I talk about how I turned that around where somebody was attacking me and I completely turned it around and I turned them into a customer. They licensed one of my photos after attacking me for my photos. Right. And then they put me in touch with, this is how the souvenirs came about, the souvenir deal. Mm-hmm. I ended up doing a 5-figure souvenir deal for some of my photos, New York City souvenirs. It was my biggest licensing deal ever, because when somebody attacked me, I didn't take it personally. And instead I said, wow, I'm going to find out what's going on with this person. And it turned out he was just a really nice guy who was having a bad day. And he was probably a little jealous or whatever. And by not taking any of that personally, by not being offended by clearly offensive comments on a public forum, I made a lot of money. It's great. And I got magnets. I'm the NYC refrigerator magnate. I got the best magnets.
Yes, you do. I have them. All right. So yes, I'm getting it. I think I'm not that confrontational, but I understand what you're saying. And now it would be different. Years ago, when people attacked you for something, it just felt awful. I just absorbed it. I guess I just allowed myself to then feel bad about myself.
Right. Remember, they're not making us feel anything, Barb. That's the whole point of this. If I feel bad about myself, it's because I feel bad about myself. And they're just the excuse now. I can just blame them for how I feel.
Okay.
Now, it is possible that I'm doing something incorrectly. It is possible that I made a mistake. It is possible I screwed something up. But I don't have to be attacked for that.
I don't have to be shamed for that. I don't have to be criticized for that. And I didn't know that because as a child, I was shamed, I was criticized, I was attacked when I did something inappropriate or when I did something incorrectly. And so I expected that from life. And that's why I lived in fear for most of my life of rejection, of criticism, because I didn't know how to handle that. See, as a 6-year-old, I couldn't say, wow, this is about you. This is not about me.
Right.
I didn't know that. I thought it was true that there was something that was not good enough about me. And I internalized that, and that became my self-image, and that's a self-image that ran my life, and I didn't even know it was running my life. This is why I wrote this darn book.
And look at the person you turned out to be.
Yeah.
Now. Yeah, great.
I'm great.
Yeah, look at you smiling, happy person.
And I was miserable for years, you know.
No, you weren't. See, I'll say no, you
I
weren't.
put on a good show.
Yes,
I
you
learned how to
did.
cover
And
that
now
up.
you put on a good show.
Now I put on a good show, but I knew how to cover up all that hurt.
Yeah, I see. I didn't, I don't think I knew how hurt you were throughout those years. So, but you're great now.
Oh, thank you. I think so too.
Okay.
All right. So the point is,
Yes.
when we feel offended, when we feel, and especially this is what I really want to bring to your attention. When we feel justified in attacking somebody back, that's the ego. I'm not saying we shouldn't defend ourselves when it's appropriate to do that. I'm not making excuses for somebody else's inappropriate behavior. And what I'm learning in my life, and again, maybe it's just me, but I can take care of myself without attacking somebody. I can take care of myself without making somebody else wrong. I can take care of myself without lashing out. And I didn't, and it's a fine line. And it's, in some cases it's appropriate to raise my voice. In some cases it's appropriate to, really set a line, draw a line with somebody and all of that. I have opportunities in my life to practice my boundaries. But I don't have to be a victim to do that. I don't have to be angry to do that. I don't have to be offended to take care of myself. And I started off this conversation, this workshop, talking about the character defects that most of us talk about in 12-step programs. And I say, those character defects for me were survival strategies. It's all I had. I didn't know that I could take care of myself without being a victim, without being angry, without being resentful. I thought I needed to be resentful or angry or passive aggressive to take care of myself. And now I see, and I'm still a work in progress on this, but I see, wow, maybe there's another way. And that doesn't involve, and again, who do you think you are? How do you see yourself? As long as I see myself as a victim, then my strategies, my survival strategies, my coping mechanisms are going to be resentment, justified anger, passive aggressive, making character assassination, making them wrong, trying to get back, trying to get even. That's how victims operate. And when I begin to see myself differently, like I did with my childhood experiences, I begin to see the other person differently. And now I can tell a new story. And when I tell a new story about what happened, I have a new experience. All right, makes sense? You want to say anything else, Barb?
No, it's good.
So that's where I'm coming from. Anybody else want to take a stab at this? So Barb, I was going to tell you were a terrible flight attendant, but I'm not going to do that.
No, I've already been told that, but I also was told I was a good one. So I don't care. No.
There you go.
I shouldn't say, no,
That's
but I
it.
shouldn't care. I don't like that word. What would be the right way to put it? I'm not offended. There you go. I feel good about myself.
There you go.
All right.
And when we really feel good about ourselves, nobody can take that away from us. we can give it away, which is what we do, and then we blame them for it. But we're giving it away. They're not taking it away from us.
And like you're saying, you're not doing that right now anymore because you're working on yourself. I'm not doing that anymore because I'm working on myself.
I'm not doing it as much, but I still have my moments. This is hard.
Oh, I guess when you said that, I was like, yeah, I still get offended. Okay. All right. Agree.
But then it's adjusting in the moment, and and then having the awareness, having the presence of mind to say, wow, I'm feeling offended, and it's got nothing to do with them. Because the truth is, it's got nothing to do with them. Again, not making excuses for somebody else's inappropriate behavior, but what they do doesn't determine how I feel. They are powerless over me. True power, the ability to consciously choose and or change our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. Nobody can do that for me. All right, thanks, Barb. Dee Dee, you want to go?
Just really quickly, I want to validate the concept. I know I was having a really difficult year, and it was the year that I had 3 relationships, 3 primary relationships, intimate kind of primary, close family, friend, whatever, good, important relationships crash on me. And it was because I was in such a place in my own self-esteem that I couldn't deal with anything that looked like insecurity from them. The good news is I didn't, even though I had that instinct or the desire or the feeling to defend and attack back, I knew better than to do that. I was able to withdraw, but I'm still in the process of healing those events within myself to tell a new story so that I can, potentially either move on or resume some kind of amicable relationship yet to be determined. But I can just, I didn't realize that it was because of my own sense of not being happy with myself that was really created my side of the responsibility of what happened to me. And so this is really powerful. I'm really glad to hear you say it in those terms. Thanks. I'm going to pass.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you, Dee Dee. And again, we're not making excuses. People can be jerks in relationships. People can do terrible things to each other. I've done terrible things to people that I supposedly love, and people who supposedly love me have done terrible things to me. That's a reality. That's a truth. I'm not denying that. And I'm not saying anybody who had that experience, I'm not saying you shouldn't feel that way. I'm not saying it was right what they did. None of that. But I am saying that we get to decide. We get to decide what that means, and we get to decide how we react to that. Now, I will also say that, in one particular relationship, I didn't talk to that person. First of all, I moved across the country, and then I didn't talk to that person for a couple of years. And that was okay. That was me setting a boundary. I didn't do it perfectly, and I realize now I probably could have handled that differently, but that was the best I could do. So the other part of the equation is forgiving myself for allowing other people to hurt me, forgiving myself for hurting other people when I'm in my own confusion, my own disease, my own craziness, and forgiving myself for not doing any of this perfectly. Remember, I started off the workshop tonight that if I'm beating myself up, I don't have a chance at a happy life. I don't have a chance at good relationships. I don't have a chance at real success in my business. I don't have if self-hatred, self-loathing, self-recrimination, I don't know how anybody could be happy living that way. And the only reason I can say that is because I lived that way for many, many, many years, decades. So I don't recommend it. All right, anybody else? Going once, going twice?
All right, great. I'm going to play the song again. We'll come back for our final goodbyes. All right, guys. So that's why we play that song. It's a good reminder. You know, it's seeing myself differently and eventually seeing other people differently and having compassion for all of us. You know, I think it's Plato or Socrates said, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting the same hard battle. So all the people who did us wrong, not making excuses for any of that, and, you know, maybe they were having a hard time. Maybe they were fighting that same hard battle. Talk about it again. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we're going to talk a lot about all of that in chapter 7. But I really want to get this point across so we're aware in the moment of when we're being run by our ego. And again, when we feel justified, when we take things personally, when we feel offended, when we want to attack, it's very disconcerting for me now because I see this when it comes up in me. It literally, it's like a rush of energy that comes up and I feel so indignant. How could you do this to me? You're breaking the rules. You're treating me unfairly. You know, how could you do that to me? That's the ego. Again, it's not to say that I don't hold other people accountable. It's not to say that I don't take care of myself. It's not to say that I don't set boundaries. It's not to say that I don't remove myself from inappropriate situations. And I don't have to be a victim to do any of that. All right, anybody want to say anything? You guys have had enough?
Yeah, kind of. But it's funny. I am suffering with this, almost like what Dee Dee said too, that, you know, going through something that is the past, and I'm kind of left like hollow. And yeah, I got to build myself up. And I did speak to somebody recently, you know, telling them a little bit about what I'm going through. And the only thing he said to me was, you know, you got to let the past go. And I was like, such a simple question. I know you say forgiveness, it's the same thing, but this person, I really asked this question and it hit me. You know, I got to let it go and just live for today and be, like you said, bigger and better every day. It's just, you know, with me, I'm using the excuse that I'm too old. Poor me. I should have done it, you know, 40 years ago. Okay. Enough. I don't want to say that anymore. I don't want to play.
I think you're doing great. I love your commitment. I could see the change in you. So keep on keeping on, whatever you're doing. And I will say this, it is, in my opinion, I think it's more than just letting go of the past. Eventually that's what happens. We do let go, but for me at least, there's steps leading up to that. You can't. I couldn't just. Just to say, because it mattered, and a lot of it hurt.
Okay, that's good.
It's almost like denying ourselves that. So we don't want to deny what we felt. We don't want to dismiss our feelings. We don't want to make ourselves wrong. But ultimately, yes, it is. You know what? It is. It's a decision. It's a choice. So I say happiness is a choice. A decision is not a feeling. I say love is a choice. A decision is not a feeling. I'm telling you right now, forgiveness is a choice, a decision. And to a large degree, it is the decision, the choice to let go of the story about what happened. But the only way to let go of that story is to replace it with another one. That's how I let go of the past. I change the story. Because you can't just forget about it.
Right.
It's hard just to forget about it because it hurt in a lot of cases. And they were, in many cases, they were acting inappropriately.
Right. But yeah, if you think about the span of time, okay, let's just say I had 40 years of that hurt, what you're talking about too. Okay, so now give me 40 years of happiness and then I'll be fine. Okay.
Well, there you go. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing right now.
All right. I got 40 years.
I
Okay.
keep saying, what are you going to do for the next 40 years? You may as well do this.
You might as well have a good day every day.
It does get easier, but, we have to go through, a lot of times I think, I want to be careful how I say this, because it may not be true for anybody else. For me, I've had to feel how bad I feel before I can feel better. And it's because most of my life I pushed those bad feelings away. And I did use things like addictions and all the stuff that I did to push those bad feelings away. And I think it's the old thing, you can't get to the other side until you go through it. Now, I don't know if that's true for everybody, but I think it's what you're feeling now. You're feeling a lot of the bad feelings, and maybe, I can tell you this, until for me at least, until I feel that, it's difficult to truly feel better. But again, as I change the story, it doesn't hurt as much. As I have compassion for the other person and say, wow, for somebody to have to attack me in that way, they must really be having a hard time. And to understand that the people in our lives, they do to us what was done to them. I think, for me at least, if I look closely, a lot of that stuff that was done to me was done to them.
Yes, I understand.
So beginning to have compassion for all of us and say, holy crap, we're all a mess,
Right. And we are. We're all a mess, and we're all okay too at the same time.
Right. Yeah. And it's getting into that place of acceptance. All right, good. Anybody else want to say anything?
No, but the background is, I know I came in late, but this background with you with the black shirt and that black thing and the moon and everything, it looks really good. So when you see this on tape, you're going to like this one. Right?
All right, good.
I want to say that this is really hard material. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for walking the walk, because it's some of the toughest material I think that anybody can look at in their lives. So I'm just grateful. Thanks, Pat.
Well, and I want to acknowledge you guys, and I know there are people who watch the replay. They can't be at the workshop, but they watch. So I want to say to all the people who are watching right now after the fact, my heart goes out to you guys. I want to acknowledge you guys for having the courage to do this. This is not easy stuff for many people. And we're really talking now about going all the way back and dealing with all that pain. It's not easy. So I want to acknowledge everybody who's committed enough to themselves, to having a new life for themselves, and committed enough to letting go of, because it does come down to that, letting go of the story and telling a new story and seeing those people differently. Because they all did the best they could, and some of it was terrible and some of it was painful. And there are a lot of people, if I don't want to do this, but if I start comparing my life to other people's lives, my life is pretty good. I mean, there are some people who suffered some real, if you want to, look at Oprah Winfrey, her story. If there was ever a person who you couldn't be angry at for being mad at the world, she had a real tough childhood. So some really terrible stuff happened. And yet, look, she's turned that into something positive. She's helped millions of people. And she could have just as easily gone off the other way, and nobody would fault her for that. So anyway, not to compare and all that, but just keep that in mind too. I mean, we all have we all got our stuff.
Okay.
All right, great. So I'm going to say goodnight, guys. Thank you so much. Remember, be bigger than you think you are today and every day. I'll see you guys next week. Have a great week.
You too. Thanks.